Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Wednesday, September 15th. Halfway through the month of September already, I guess, once we're done with today. September 15th, 2021. Time is flying by. Plenty to catch up on today. No weird stories, I don't think, about any body parts of any friends of any cousins in any Caribbean islands, as far as I know. Not today. They're not bringing them forward. Today's news, and I'm sure we'll get to it when we speak with Greg, is the big result in the California recall gubernatorial election. And look, the thing was trounced. And a good thing, too, because, of course, we've been hearing over the past couple of days that the California Republican Party, the National Republican Party, Republicans everywhere, and their leading candidate, inexplicably the leading candidate, Larry Elder, has been preparing for days, if not weeks now, to claim that the election was stolen from him, which is a claim that it was never based in anything, but I assume was supposed to be premised on the idea that there would be a close call in the recall election, and Democrats, to their credit, organized, and to the credit of regular Californians everywhere who may or may not be moved by the prompting of the Democratic Party, everybody came out and did their part and didn't leave it to others, and they overwhelmed the recall forces, which is as it should have been, because, of course, as we learned, the stupid California recall election law, separate. I mean, there's a certain sense to separating the question and saying, well, if the current governor is recalled, then he's just sort of out of the running for who would replace him because he's been recalled. But with 50-something candidates running, it was entirely possible that the next highest vote getter would be someone who got, in the single digits. It wasn't quite that bad for Elder, but he did get trounced, and the recall question lost, I don't know. I mean, everybody went to bed early because it was so clear. I think about 8 to 10 minutes into the counting after the polls closed, calls started to come in terms of, this thing is over. It was like 30-point victory for the no on the recall. And good thing, too, because we all learned a lot about what Larry Elder would think he was going to do to the state, how much success he'd have in doing it over the objection of a Democratic legislature, we don't know. But, of course, these days, I don't think they wait around for rule of law anyway. So they were all set to claim that there was widespread fraud, but the result was so overwhelming and so thoroughly crushing and thoroughly embarrassing for the Republican Party that they didn't even bother. The Elder came out and conceded and said, whatever, I don't know, who cares what his speech was. Nobody paid attention to it. Never mattered in any sense, but that, it was nice to see. And this, of course, will continue on, and Trump will, I don't know, whether it's Trump forcing the issue or people just trying to see if they can emulate the Trump success. But, Republicans all over the place are going to continue to set themselves up as potential fraud victims. I don't think this erases it. Just like, we didn't erase Trumpism just by defeating him at the ballot box. Something more is required to rid ourselves of Trumpism. We can continue to ponder what that might be. But for now, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live. Leading off today's show, Bill says, anyway, for reasons Kagro X, me, David Waldman, will patiently explain to you with 100 different analogies, the California recall election results are excellent news for John McCain. There are some in the media who won't give up on the narrative of this was all a huge slap in the face for Democrats nationally or for Gavin Newsom personally, and French Laundry definitely sparked the whole thing, even though the recall paperwork was filed, I think, well before even that. They just latched on to that. We discussed the other day that Republicans for a long time now have been into, day one impeachment or replacement or recall, whatever remedies that they think are available to them. So there really couldn't have been anything better than a resounding defeat like this. So I don't know. I just want to get that out of the way. Not that we're done with it, because we'll be talking a lot about it. I don't want to get in the way of Greg Dworkin's roundup of the same news, because he'll have actually done some research. Here's what other people are saying about it. Some of which is right, some of which is wrong. We'll sort them out and tell you why. And I do have another piece of good news. This internationally recognized as great news. Welcoming a new Patreon sponsor, Karen D. Karen, thank you very much. Even despite the fact, the bad rap that Karens get on this show, we apologize for it all the time. And I imagine, in my head, that's the reason that you decided to come on in and join us as a sponsor. Thanks for joining. Wow, oops, I've got the volume turned way up on that. So I'll work on the overdrive here. I was messing with the controls yesterday. I was trying to play that really interesting rap from the doctor who's actually very good at it, explaining immunology very quickly and the function of the vaccine. So I had to I don't know what I did. I turned it up or turned it down, I think, to get rid of the bass, and then I thought I put it back to where it was, but I was wrong. All right, so let's see how the volume is now. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. So that must be why I was hearing voices yesterday. You had turned up the volume.
Yes, right. It's on the back of Greg's head, and everyone knows that it's a difficult reach to get all the way to Connecticut in the morning. Also, congratulations not only to Karen D. Thank you, Karen, for joining us as a Patreon sponsor, but congratulations to Connecticut as a state for removing itself, essentially, from the my nightly top 10 list. And I actually missed it. Had to have it pointed out and make a correction, but they have been hanging on to the 10th place ranking in the number of COVID deaths per million residents, and they have been displaced by South Dakota. Who would have guessed that South Dakota would have had a late surge for no apparent reason and replaced it? The list, by the way, now no longer majority or even half northeastern states. And I would think that today, based on the trends, Mississippi is poised to replace New Jersey as the hardest hit in terms of deaths per million from COVID. The message on infectious disease and pandemics in general, don't call it early in terms of who's going to get hit the worst. It will probably embarrass you. And so the early Trump administration predictions that this was a Northeastern liberal elites blue state phenomenon, given time, and of course phenomenal screw-ups and intentional.
Don't forget intent. Yes. It wasn't just screw-ups.
Yes, that's true.
We want to catch you, said the southern states.
Right, and they did. And so Mississippi, by the end of the day, I think will rank first. Louisiana poised to has surpassed New York, now poised to sit in that third place spot for a little while until they catch New Jersey. But Alabama on the rise, Arizona breaking through as well, and South Dakota.
And it may not make the top 10, but Tennessee is a dark horse there.
Yeah, I haven't. They haven't made an appearance on the deaths per million list, but on the infections per million, most cases per million, they broke through past number one and are running away with it, like putting thousands and thousands of cases per million between themselves in the number 2 spot, running away with it, and still doing it too. So eventually the deaths, of course, will catch up with them as well, it being the Delta variant, and we look for them to join the list soon. Florida as well, finally expected to break through into the top 10 probably in the next 2 weeks.
So and also there was an election in California.
Right. But we crushed them so badly that even Republicans are trying to pretend there was no election in California yesterday.
Or that it doesn't mean anything. That's the fun part. Now, there's some great takes here, but just to get people in perspective here, in case you didn't wake up with the numbers in your head, or you didn't stay up to watch them.
Right.
Shall Gavin Newsom be recalled or removed from the office of governor? That's how the question goes. And the answer is no. 63.9% said no, and 36.1% said yes, with a lot of interesting stuff coming out about what all that means. And my favorite take probably is from John Hendrickson, who's a writer and editor at The Atlantic. Was the recall necessary?
But
no.
Specific.
But did we learn some valuable lessons about the 2022 and 24 elections? Also no.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, unless it's the Republican pro-pandemic stance is extraordinarily unpopular.
Well, that's the thing. You know, you have to step back and look at the big picture.
Okay, here I go.
California has an incredible amount of income inequality, and homelessness is a top issue for both Republicans and Democrats. Not the top. I think pandemic was the top for Democrats and the economy for Republicans, but I think homelessness was second or third with both. Might even have been second with both. The NBC News exit poll of early and election day voters found 70% support Newsom's mandate requiring students to wear masks in school. 63% said getting vaccinated against the coronavirus is more a public health responsibility than a personal choice.
Okay.
Now, those for and against recalling him had different views of which issues are most important. Among voters who wanted Newsom removed, the economy was the top issue for 27%, followed by homelessness, which was the top issue for 23%, crime 17%, and COVID 15%. So COVID was fourth for basically Republicans. The pandemic was the top issue for 42%, homelessness second at 22%, wildfires, the economy, and crime. Interestingly, homelessness was second in both groups, which gives you an idea how big it is, and that's basically a surrogate for income inequality. Only the Democrats mentioned wildfires. Republicans didn't even have that in their top four. And the fact that homelessness and the pandemic were the two issues for Democrats, it's therefore not surprising that the salience of the French Laundry screw-up early on, French Laundry is a fancy restaurant in Napa that Gavin Newsom went to without a mask and partied while he told everybody else they had to stay home and lock themselves down. And you can argue, well, you know, he won 2-1. What's the big deal? Actually, that French Laundry error, and it was an error, helped launch the impetus to get all of the signatures on the recall. So it did have salience, even though it didn't decide the election. And so that's how come we keep highlighting it. Everybody else in California is highlighting it too. It's hard to read a LA Times story and not have the French Laundry thing mentioned. So I think that's interesting. One of the more interesting takes also is from Perry Bacon.
Do they serve that?
I'm going to have a lot of I didn't get it right stuff, but he has a piece called Newsom's Winning Recall Strategy Offers a Playbook for Democrats in 2022. The Democratic establishment played its cards exactly right in California, much to my surprise. I was annoyed that California's Democratic establishment was, in my view, missing or ignoring political reality by not running an alternative to Newsom. Newsom basically said, don't vote for anybody else. Just vote no for me.
Okay.
And the pundit said, well, that's a bad take because what happens if Newsom loses? You should have somebody running so that you have an alternative. And the Democratic establishment said there is an alternative. It's me or Elder.
Yep.
And that's a much, much better strategy. So Perry Bacon writes, and I was worried about the worst case scenario. Newsom's recalled 88-year-old Senator Dianne Feinstein can no longer serve due to health reasons, and a Republican governor replaces her. I was wrong, he said. Those words, I was wrong. Pundits never say that.
Oh. Well,
I was wrong. The Democratic establishment was right. Newsom overwhelmingly defeated the recall effort. While that victory was in large part because California is a very Democratic-leaning state, the strategy of California Democrat leaders helped ensure the recall was unsuccessful. If Democrats had embraced the candidate just in case Newsom was ousted, the race would have been Newsom versus Democrat X versus Republican Y, and having a real Democratic alternative would have created incentives for Newsom to compete with one another. Instead, Democrats forced voters to either back Newsom or choose a Republican. And the Republican in particular was, of course, Larry Elder, who, by the way, conceded gracefully and told his followers to accept the results, despite all the noise he was making about, I even have a website saying it's fraud. He was getting a close vote. It wasn't a close vote.
Well, you know, he that was a late development for him, and his initial position on the whole thing was, you know, that Trump had lost the election fair and square, and he got, you know, booed at the rallies essentially, And then, whoop, I changed my mind. Total fraud everywhere. And then, of course, he got walloped, and he said, well, these people haven't carried me.
I mean, people really have to recognize that it really was a walloping. It isn't, Newsom eked out a win, or Newsom survived.
He was crushed.
No, Newsom conquered and crushed is more accurate, as you say. Ryan Matsumoto from CBS, when 62% of the expected vote was reporting in 2020, Biden was ahead by 38 points. Right now, with 62% of the expected vote reporting, Newsom's ahead by 33.
Okay.
Now, there's a decent chance that when all the votes are counted, Newsom actually beats his 2018 margin of 23.9.
All right.
Now, we'll have to see what happens because it can fall precipitously. Remember, the polling consensus was that Newsom wins by 15 with the late surge that people were picking up.
All right.
So if you're off by 10 points, even though it's off in the direction that you said it was going to be, that's a big miss.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right? If it were 10 points the other way, oh my God, how did the polls fail?
Right.
But if it's 10 points in your favor.
That seems like a mistake.
I didn't even notice. They said he was going to win and he won. They said he was going to win by a lot and he won by a lot.
That's definitely going to make a difference. Yes. Pick the wrong guy, that's going to be bad.
Anyway, so we won't know what happens for another month because it takes a long time to get the polls counted, all the votes counted. A fellow named California Dem, TM, trademark, right, has this really fun thread where he picks on all the pundits, and he says right off the bat, I'm going to be petty, but this is fun. Let me read you all the pundits who just got this wrong.
All right.
Okay. No one recall won by double digits this evening because California Democrats ignored the advice offered by a gambling and probability election pundit who's based out of New York City. Guess who that is?
Oh, I don't know. Who?
Nate Silver on August 23rd. It's self-destructive, more than self-interested. Pretty decent chance Newsom gets recalled. Democrats could potentially keep the seat if they urge their voters to consolidate behind an alternative Democrat, but instead they're telling them not to vote on the replacement. Now, the difference between Perry Bacon, who said the same thing, and Nate is that Perry said, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath for Nate to say that.
I got to tell you, that's, I didn't realize that was what Nate Silver, I don't know whether he changed his take on it or was that his original one. I didn't pay attention to Nate Silver on it, but that is extraordinarily dumb. That's a very, I don't know. And I'm saying it in hindsight, I guess, but honestly, I suppose if you had asked me then, should you back an alternative, I would have said, well, no, that's crazy because I don't know. That seems really obvious. You want to give
it like there is no alternative. I'm it.
Yeah, I had no idea. Literally no. I paid almost no attention to the recall. But
right, and these
I had no idea anybody counseled anything other than that. That's nuts.
Right. There's an election in Virginia coming up too. Just in case
I am
you're not
aware
paying
of
attention.
That one.
So I thought I should mention
one nominee for that, and believe me, I am aware. He calls me every day to tell me who he is.
Right. And who not to vote for. So Josh Krasauer, August 24th. This is another August 24th take. Remember, Josh writes a column called Against the Grain for National Journal, and today's Against the Grain column is that backing vaccine mandates, which are very popular, is really risky for Democrats.
Sure. Well, it's him against the grain, and the grain won again.
Right. That's what I thought. That's what I said. This is against the grain, and well-apt column. Josh Krasauer on August 24th. College-educated voters who spent 2020 posting on their Instagram stories about the existential importance of voting and queening Stacey Abrams on Twitter, they now seem checked out because his theory was Democrats were indifferent and not going to show up. It turns out, boy, did they show up. It's
giant duh for you, Josh.
Turnout in the early voting period of this election exceeded all turnout in the 2014 midterms and hit that 40% benchmark before Election Day. We're on pace to shatter all turnout records in an off-year election in the middle of September. Right? So, no, Democrats are not complacent, and no, Democrats haven't checked out.
Well, sorry, Josh Nothing-Nower.
Right? Here's Hugh Hewitt. Pretty sure this doesn't play well in California with small business crushed by lockdowns, parents who don't want second graders masked, farmers and the men and women who work for them cut off from water. Newsom doesn't have answers to any of many crises.
Any of many. Okay.
That's what Hugh Hewitt said.
Yes.
And Orange County, which is where Hewitt lives, went for Newsom and may have even gone for Newsom bigger than the last time they voted.
What do you know? Out of touch with his neighbors.
Remember Orange County?
Craziness.
Orange County's a pretty conservative place.
Yeah, it once was. I mean, until conservatism became Trumpism / Hewittism.
Right.
So
right. California recall exit poll from CNN is a good time to throw this in. And there's some interesting things. Party ID, Democrats are 43% of the electorate, and they voted no 94-6.
All right.
Republicans are 26% of the electorate, and they voted yes 90-10.
Uh-huh.
So 10% of Republicans voted no, 6% of Democrats voted yes. There were more Trump voters that voted not to do this than there were Democrats who voted to.
Wow.
But remember, Hugh Hewitt was making the claim that the suburbs are lost for Democrats because this, that, and everything else. So the suburban vote, which is 62% of the California vote, voted no 56-44.
Ta-da. All right.
The cities voted 60-40.
Yeah. There's no one that likes you guys. Your plan is stupid. It's death on a stick, and no one wants it.
Work full time? Yes, 54. No, 54. Yes, 46. So if you work full time, and the answer is yes to that question. If you work full time, you voted no 54%. If you didn't work full time, you voted no 64%.
I don't know. Okay, so the more free time you had to think about it, the less inclined you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're a gig worker.
Okay. Yes. Then you're
right.
I don't.
Remember Hugh Hewitt said, this thing about masks in schools going to doom Gavin Newsom, right?
Right.
Men with children voted no 57%. Women with children voted no 57%.
Wow.
Men without children voted 53% no, and women without children voted 65% no.
Huh.
So the people with kids were, pretty much in line.
Interesting. Yeah, a little less. I guess there was a little more anti-mask sentiment to be found. I mean, I guess the people without kids are just like, I'm not thinking about that, where my vote is inclined in terms of masking kids in school. But all right.
Armando picked up on this, which is, I think, pretty interesting. Education by race, that is to say, education plus race. White voters with a college degree?
Yeah.
You want to guess what percentage of them voted no?
White voters, college degree, no. 72.
Close, 68.
60.
That's a big number.
That's what I meant.
We should get that number in every election.
Close. Sure. Right. It's not as nice as another number, but 68's a good one.
Right. White voters, no degree, voted yes to get rid of them, 57-43.
I hate smart people. Get out.
Interestingly, white voters' college degree is 30% to California. White voters' no degree is 26%.
Okay.
Right? Voters of color.
Yes.
College, 63-37, no.
All right.
Voters of color, no degree, 59-41. Now, you could take a look at that and say, the Democrats are in trouble after having won a 2-1 election win.
Right. Sure.
But on the other hand, you could subtly say, look, the fact that they only got 60% of voters of color shows that income inequality, in fact, was a big issue. And it was.
All right. Yeah. But they're not crazy.
But I would love to get those white college numbers up all over the country. And again, what's the import of that? The fact that it was a one-off for suburbs to vote Democrat in that 2020 election because Biden made Trump the issue.
Yeah.
Well, Gavin Newsom made Trump the issue.
Well,
and he kept the suburbs.
A 2-off. So
just make it a 3 or 4 off.
Right. Trump seems more than enthused about the idea of inserting himself into the 2022 elections. Keeps pretending he's going to be alive to run in 2024. So okay, we'll take it. 3 off, 4 off.
Here's some other ones. Is getting coronavirus vaccine more of a personal choice or a public health responsibility?
Do I get to answer?
Yeah.
It's public health responsibility.
Well, 63% of Californians agree with you.
All right.
So take that, Josh Gresham.
Moving to California.
Right.
I got my finger on the pulse.
So I think that's all kind of interesting and just gives you an idea that some of the pundits did not get this right.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
I mean.
Okay, and one of my favorite pundits got a really bizarre take. This wasn't from August. This was from last night. This is Casey Hunt, who was on NBC, MSNBC, now on CNN.
All right.
And this was weird. She says, California governor, big picture, one of the top Democrats in the country got caught living like an elite while everyone else suffered. That's the French Laundry thing. Elites versus the rest is the driving force in our politics right now, and Democrats have a tough needle to thread in California and nationwide. This after a 2-1 win. Democrats need to prove they can govern for everybody, and if you look at California, it's not necessarily the best test case for national Democrats because they're concerned about homelessness and crime. Actually, it is the best case because that's the case that Republicans are going to make nationally.
Yeah.
And it's a fifth of the country. So this is like crazy analysis here. Republicans not named Trump did learn that they had unrealized opportunities with working class voters, including black and Latino voters, as they watched 2020 returns rolled in. That's because of the pandemic. Obviously, California is a special place. That's capitalized. But the fact that a Democratic national star in waiting faced a recall and then had to fight hard for it does say a lot about the potential challenges Democrats face across the map. It does not. It tells us about California's stupid recall rules.
Yes. You get the sense that was written a couple days ago.
It was written 8 hours ago.
Yeah, but and there it is. I mean, I guess it just, I don't know. She's intent on having that be because that's the only analysis. I don't know what analysis do you normally write when you lose 2-1? Well, they got crushed.
That's a wake-up call for Democrats who woke up.
Okay, good job.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on. Tell me more about how the Republicans who went full Trump got pummeled yesterday. Could I hear more about that?
I like that. That's a topic. This is one of those things where I'm just going to, keep reading stories about the recall and how it went.
Right. It's better than Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, there were other races, Boston mayor.
What else happened? Yeah. Okay.
And a couple of other races that we probably won't cover, but, you should be aware that they happened.
We totally
the top 5 candidates in Boston are women of color.
Hey, all right.
And if you know Boston, that's like pretty amazing, where a white guy usually wins.
Right. From Boston.
Right. So Michelle Wu looks like she won, so that would be of interest. But let's get back to California.
Where they got killed.
Dreaming here. We have Chris Cillizza writing on August 27th. Joe Biden's making a trip to campaign for Gavin Newsom next week. Why?
Yeah. Well, I don't even know
to make sure Gavin Newsom crushes his opponent, and also to empathize with the wildfires, and also to push his Build Back Better stuff and his agenda. I mean, those are some answers to that.
I don't even know why you would ask why. That doesn't even make sense to me.
That must mean that Newsom's in trouble.
Okay.
That's the subtext.
I see. Well, I didn't.
Otherwise, why would you ask why?
Right. I mean, I'm curious, and I guess maybe because I have the hindsight of how.
I have to go back and look. Maybe that Survey USA poll that said it was close came out on that date, because there's a lot of August 27 tweets.
Okay.
Between the 24th and the 27th, somewhere around there. And here's another August 27 tweet. This one is from Edward Isaac DeVere. New from me, California has a knack for anticipating America's political future. What does Gavin Newsom's recall election say about what's coming? Well, if he had lost, it says everything, but he won, so it says nothing.
Oh, well,
I don't know if you knew that.
I prefer
right.
To
All
say,
the people who wrote stuff like that are going to say, "Well, you can't look at a California special with their weird rules and make anything out of it."
Yeah. Okay. I mean that. Well, that would have been a plausible argument had you been silent to this.
Yeah, but I promise you, they would have made that argument loudly the other way if Newsom had lost.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is stay silent. It's probably the
Bill
best
Kristol
idea.
on August 24th. Democrats around the country have slipped back into a risky kind of complacency now that Trump is out of office, and things are no different in California, except for the fact that California just set a record for off-year elections.
Yes, well, casually just stomping. All right. Yeah, well, a lot of people were nervous briefly. I guess probably because, like you said, there was this poll that appeared to make it look like it was a tight race. And, okay, it's fair to get nervous about things. We do that. That's a habit.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Kristol, though, I thought he was from the other side. Supremely confident.
Well, he's a never-Trumper, so at the moment he's on our side.
Okay. Well, but there's no Trump anymore. But all right.
Right. So there's maybe another 10 pundits, some of whom you've never heard of. But again, I just think it was all really interesting. This is incredible and really important. Oh, he won by a big amount. Well, nothing to see here, folks. Just move along.
Okay. No, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to learning the names of some of these wrong pundits.
Yeah.
Even if I've never heard of them before.
Not worth it. Promise.
Caitlyn Jenner, one of them?
I think she was out doing something else instead of electing.
I guess so. I saw somebody tweet around a screenshot. I guess you got like 1%.
Right. So other news, it is in California. The U.S. Army says active duty soldiers must be vaccinated by December 15th.
Okay. I saw on Twitter where it was yesterday they had to do it or else they'd all be court-martialed and maybe shot.
Those who refuse to be vaccinated and have not been given an exemption will face suspension.
Okay. Seems Army-ish.
Yeah, and a lot of Army and ex-Army people are lining up here for the comments after that saying, well, this is what you have to do. As a U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander retired, I was required to line up and receive whatever vaccinations Uncle Sam told me I must take. I didn't whine. I didn't snivel. I didn't stamp my feet and pout. Mm-hmm. I did my patriotic duty like the naval officer I was.
Right. Donald Trump would have said about this if he had been on the other side of the issue. They know what they signed up for.
Right.
So,
which is exactly something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what, but it's
I
exactly
don't know.
Something.
Right, but yeah, if you get killed in Africa, you know what you signed up for. If you are getting the vaccine, no, freedom, something. Right.
So interesting that you mentioned that Bill Kristol, and what side is he really on?
Yeah, what side?
This is a piece from The Atlantic by David Frum. What the Never-Trumpers want now. The former cultural core of the GOP is exiting the party, and that includes Kristol and Frum. The Democrats should keep those voters in their corner, and here's how to do it.
You are them. Just do it.
Many of the conservatives and Republicans appalled by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Someday this would be all over, they hoped, and politics would return to normal, but normal has not returned. Those elected Republicans who stood for legality when Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election found themselves party pariahs in 21, on their way to being out of politics altogether in 2022. And it's not just a few politicians. The anti-Trump Republicans didn't return home in 2020. Now in 2021, their former party seems much more eager to welcome anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers than to win them back.
Yes.
Okay. So go for him, David Frum says. Okay. Economists call this revealed preference, a choice between two competing alternatives that forces the chooser to discover higher values. pro-Trump and anti-Trump conservatives have often each been mutually horrified to discover how radically their highest values differed from those of old allies and former comrades. Not only differ, but diverge. Maybe the future pro-Trump Republican was always slightly more sympathetic to authoritarianism, maybe slightly more tolerant to corruption. Then Trump shoved authoritarianism and corruption into the political debate. Suddenly people who like Trump are forced into positions they had never planned to take. Okay.
Yes.
On November 7th, 2020, former Trump Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal headlined, "If he loses, Trump will concede gracefully."
Yeah.
Speaking of pundits who got it wrong. That, of course, proved a historically false prediction. Mulvaney had worked with Trump. He knew Trump. How could he get things so wrong? Partly because the article was an attempt to influence Trump, and the only way Trump could be influenced, outrageous flattery. But I wonder if it was not also a coping device for Mulvaney himself. He faced the question, what would he personally do if Trump turned traitor to the Constitution and attacked election results? He didn't want to think about that, so he denied the reality. On January 7th, Mulvaney resigned from the mostly honorific position of U.S. Special Envoy for Northern Ireland. We didn't sign up for what we saw, and then he went silent. Speaking more would have put him on a path out of the Republican world, and that was a path he didn't want to walk, but some people did walk it. So many Democrats and liberals may wonder at this point, so what? Who cares? Why is this any of our problem? But it is. President Biden's approval number sharply dipped in summer 2021, driven by a steep drop in non-affiliated voters. It looks a lot as if the Republican leaners who provided Biden his margin of victory cooled on him in August and September. Democratic loyalists may find it exasperating to be urged to worry about these fickle new supporters. Republican leaders pamper and flatter their base with scant regard for uneasy moderates. Why shouldn't Democrats do the same? Because Democrats can't do the same because their situation isn't the same. The Democrats can't win with a base-first strategy. The base isn't cohesive or big enough and doesn't live in the places favored by the rules of U.S. politics. So it's not ultimately a disadvantage. This comparative weakness of the Democratic base, based on geography and the electoral college he's talking about, obliges Democrats to build broad national coalitions of a kind the Republicans haven't achieved since the days of Chrysler K-Car, Lee Iacocca. And those broader coalitions, in turn, deliver better government. So thanks to Trump, Democrats find themselves leading a coalition more affluent and less progressive than the coalition many Democratic activists might desire. And we just saw that in California, for example. If Trump decides to run again, that one act will certainly fortify the new Democratic coalition. And that's why it was smart for Gavin Newsom, by the way, to run against Trump.
Yes.
So, except the never-Trumpers.
Okay.
And he goes through some of the issues in regard here, moderation and niceness, And the pro-Trump Republicans and conservatives got one thing right about their anti-Trump former comrades. Never Trump was not fundamentally a political movement. It was a moral reflex. Will that reflex now be integrated into normal politics? If it can, it'll transform American politics and very possibly save the country from polarization, extremism, bigotry, and authoritarianism. All right, so go moral. Go Reverend Barber. Go, this is the right thing to do. And so when people like Josh Kraushaar say, well, it's risky politics to push vaccines so hard because you'll turn off all the anti-vaxxers, the proper answer is, well, it's the right policy, so screw them.
Yeah, that is true.
And not because we want to screw them, but because it's the right policy. They can come aboard or not. Up to them. They have a choice. They can get a test every week.
Yes.
But one way or the other, the Army has to get your shots or you're suspended as of December 15th.
Yes. All we're doing here with the military members is a revealed preference exercise.
Right.
He's quite correct about that. How did Nate Silver miss that not offering another Democratic candidate wasn't a revealed preference exercise?
I don't know. What are the odds?
I don't know. I thought he was like all into.
What are the odds that Nate would miss?
Right. The needle is moving. The odds are growing greater. I guess I don't know. Why miss the chance to use an economic predictor like that? Revealed preference. Okay.
So 2 pieces from Jonathan Bernstein, separate pieces, but they sort of tie everything together here. The first one is called "Don't Fret About a Backlash to Biden Vaccine Mandate." This is in the Pundit Roundup, but let me give it to you. It might be behind a paywall anyway, so sorry about that.
Well, I'll just look at it.
Remember that many unvaccinated Americans aren't hardcore resistors, just people who need a push, and the president gave them one. That's why we see all these companies saying, you know what, our employees are signing up. And even with that New York State upstate New York hospital where people left, most people, in fact, got vaccinated. They went from something like 56% to 75% with the mandate. So it does work. And Bernstein writes, it's also plausible that partial workplace compliance will encourage others to go along. Even at this late date, there's still those who don't know how to go about getting their shots, don't know it's free, don't know its side effects are minimal or non-existent. A guy in my pickup basketball game, which was revived this summer with a vaccination mandate, told his friends he had no idea how to get his shots. He's playing now. I still can't guard him.
Well, he's healthy, so he doesn't need a shot, I'm sure is what he thought. How do you not know how to get one?
Well, you don't pay attention. None of this is to predict that you just said, well, go to CVS, get it there. None of this is to predict that Biden's initiative will be a smashing success, although some early indications are that mandates or mandate-like policies seem to work. The flip side is skepticism about people accurately predicting their own behavior to pollsters is the same applies to public opinion. So we should also regard polls about mandates taken before the policy with skepticism. It could play out differently. I'll never do it. Well, you have to do it to keep your job. I'll never do it. Well, they mean it. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. Right. And they brought it here, and they gave it to us in the lunchroom.
I'll leave the Army. You will? Okay. Well, fine.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Right.
I crumbled. I bitched. I got my shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people who are sort of into the Army as a lifestyle probably, in the end, just won't leave.
Yeah, probably grumble and bitch, and then, line up and do what they're supposed to do.
That's
and
part
do
of
their
the
duty.
And
And
they
more
love
power to them.
complaining about life in the Army and never leaving.
Right. The flip side to the conversation is Jonathan Bernstein with this other article on September 13th. Republicans have declared war against honest elections, and that's why it was so good to see Larry Elder accept the results.
Yes. Back to the
more GOP leaders pretend that voting results are rigged frauds, the more everyone in the party will believe it, and the more U.S. democracy will suffer. But also, the more their own voters won't turn out, like in Georgia.
Oh, yeah. And I guess California.
Right. The dangerous Republican decision to portray more and more elections as inherently fraudulent, described in detail by Greg Sargent in an important Washington Post column last week, and here too, is a mostly new development inspired by Trump, and yet there's something familiar about it, and that's bad news for democracy in the U.S. The reason this new focus of Republican politics may seem familiar because it's similar to the long GOP war on the media. And just as that effort was both bad for democracy and very successful, this one may well be too. Complaints that the self-proclaimed neutral media are biased probably go back to the beginning of unaligned media about 100 years ago. Close call will sometimes go against one side, and humans are prone to jump into conclusions about motives and bias rather than accepting that the breaks sometimes go the other way. Watch any baseball game, see people talk about the umpires and how they call balls and strikes, for example.
Yes. I would say that's probably true.
So this is what Republicans are now beginning to do with election administration. And that's why it's so important to do things that help with that. One of the things that helps with that, by the way, and I'll wrap up because it's Wednesday and I got to get going a little early, but the issues about how you do reconciliation and voting rights and get the Democratic agenda passed. Okay. It's possible, not guaranteed by any means, that there's a grand bargain brewing whereby Joe Manchin, who in July rewrote the Voting Rights Act to be for the People Act in the way that he likes, gets passed in the Senate in exchange for less money for reconciliation. That's the grand bargain. Why do you have to make a grand bargain with Joe Manchin? Because he holds the vote that counts.
Yes.
Now, it wouldn't be a grand bargain of any worth unless there's some sort of carve-out for election stuff in regard to filibuster. That remains to be seen. But Manchin has actually been pretty cooperative in playing ball, other than saying, I don't want to spend that much money on reconciliation. Yeah. And the Democrats in the House and Senate are beginning to make noise about, well, we may not be able to get everything we want, but if you count it a certain way, we're getting more than it appears. And the fact, as somebody pointed out, that they're making these discussions public suggests that they're a lot closer to a deal than not. That rather than the public discussion being a sign that things aren't going well, it's actually a sign that they are, because otherwise they wouldn't be so public about it.
I guess that's possible.
So, that's like predicting what's going to happen with the California recall. Save that tweet and let's see whether it turns out to be that way. Yeah, so, again, there's so much going on, and it's such a difficult thing to do. But I'm not looking at the signs and portents and omens and entrails and saying, oh, we're doomed. if anything, it just looks like it's going along the usual messy track, and things aren't out of control yet.
Okay. We can accept that. Although I would like to be able to say we trounce all opposition in the legislative battle as we did in California yesterday. But
right.
Yeah, the numbers aren't there for that. But a win of any sort would be a nice trouncing. So, all right, we hang on and wait and see once again. But
right. So I think the big task in front of the White House isn't any of that stuff. It's really just sorting out what do you do with boosters and what do you do with masks in kids under 12 and what do you do with the vaccine for them.
Yes, please.
And so it's really important soon that 5 to 12-year-olds get approved for vaccine, and it's really important soon for the White House to straighten out their message about what are they really telling kids to do, because parents need to know now because school started.
Yeah, it would be nice to figure that out at some point soon. I did see something the other day that indicated that it might be as soon as next month when the vaccine is approved, at least in an emergency basis, I guess, for kids 5 and up. So I hope that turns out to be true. Could have used it a little earlier, but, the big anti-vax complaint, which they don't actually cling to genuinely, they just use as an excuse, is you're moving too quickly. Well, okay, so now they're moving with deliberate speed, and they'll just say it was too deliberate or something like that later on, or for that matter, Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend.
One last piece, Kaiser Health News has just published a piece here. At least 26 states have passed laws limiting public health powers. 16 states have limited the power of public health officials. 17 states limited vaccine rules, and 9 states banned or limited mask mandates. So that's something we all have to follow. It's doesn't mean that they're going to stick. We'll have to watch Florida and Texas in particular. They make the most noise.
Yes. There's going to be some states that reverse course.
Right, exactly.
Definitely. And, but I guess now the challenge is if you want to do something, maybe the Never Trumpers ought to be working on this with their still remaining Republican friends. What's a face-saving way to get these states to turn around? Right. Engineer that.
And 2 last points before I go. One, our friend Taniel, who watches these things very closely for details, notes that roughly 45% of the 9+ million California ballots left the second question, who should replace Newsom, blank.
Yeah, okay.
That was his strategy. That was his messaging. That's what he told people to do.
Yeah.
It worked.
Akin to bullet voting, as they call it in the multi-candidate elections, where you're, say, voting for town council or something, and there's 5 seats open, and you can vote for up to 5 candidates out of the 800 you might have in your town. If you're an extreme partisan for somebody, or you just are iffy about others, you can vote for just one, and it makes a big impact. This was a good strategy. I don't know why anybody thought anybody's
had a town election was in that situation like we do in New England is well familiar with the strategy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I only voted for the one I want. I don't know these other people, and I'm not diluting it.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to leave it to chance, but it's just a coin toss. I don't know what this person is about. I'm not going to be responsible for putting them in office just because I was told to vote for up to 5.
Right, and then I have to mention, you don't have to mention, but you can talk about it if you want to. I don't know if you want to. That there's a new book out by Woodward and Bob Costa, which is getting a lot of attention for 2 anecdotes that have been published.
Sure.
The first is that General Milley took steps to have contact with his Chinese equivalents to make sure there was no misunderstanding about going to war.
Right. Outrage.
Which is raising debate about whether or not Milley overstepped his outside the chain of command stuff. And the other, which isn't getting as much play but ought to, is Mike Pence not knowing what to do when Trump told him to throw the certification. So he asked for advice from Dan Quayle.
Yes. That was an interesting angle on it.
And Dan Quayle said, Mike, you have no choice. You have to do this. It's not even a question, open and shut case.
Yeah, which was astonishing, just that Dan Quayle was able to answer like that. I know everybody gets down on him because and don't ask him about the potato incident.
Yeah, but he's not a bad political analyst. And by the way, Elwood Dowd, one of the commenters at Daily Kos, when we were talking about it this morning, chatting on Pundit Roundup, said, probably the subtext here that people are missing is Pence wasn't unsure what to do getting advice from an old hand, Dan Quayle. Trump was floating a trial balloon with establishment bushies to see whether it would fly, and the answer was no frickin' way.
Yeah, that's a possibility, too.
That makes a whole lot more sense than trying to get advice from Dan Quayle on what to do about anything.
Well, that's true. Probably. Although, the first read of it that I saw was also included the I don't know. I mean, I guess it's true. Who knows? But the fuller picture of it was that Pence was approached by Trump and was striving to find a way to back Trump, and ended up talking to Dan Quayle, and Dan Quayle said, no, you just can't do it. I know what you want to do, and I know why you want to do it, but no, it can't be done. And that would reverse a lot of the early narrative on Mike Pence, reluctantly being recognized by some as perhaps something of a heroic figure and standing up to Trump and saying we're not going to do it. But apparently he spent that time saying, how can I be a toady? And then Dan Quayle, of all people, told him, you really can't. So I don't know how that one's going to sort out. But there's a range of possibilities in there, and I'd be interested to see which spin wins out.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a story for today.
It is a story.
It summarizes the last 24, 48 hours.
That. Yeah, it was huge. Everybody's out there calling for, the Republicans are out there calling for resignations from everybody and a court-martial for Milley. But, of course, Marjorie Trader Greene is among them, and so she misspelled Marshall. So Marshall of the Supreme Court is going to court-martial Mark Milley. Well done there, Georgia, for electing another idiot. It's a common error.
It isn't clear what Milley did. This is a book. It's not testimony in front of Congress. He is testifying at the end of the month in front of Congress under oath.
That's going to be fun.
I would be perfectly fine if Milley actually did this and resigned, because that would be a really honorable thing to do. But I don't know that he really did this, and I don't know that he needs to resign. I'm just saying.
Yes. Two things that we have yet to straighten out, and I've seen commentary online from supposed experts. We'll have to sort out who's the real expert and who's just kidding. But there are some who say there really was nothing untoward about what Milley did, and it's actually a frequently exercised option. But another way of looking at it without any of the context is to say, well, he overstepped the chain of command, et cetera, et cetera. And, that's all. That may even turn out to be true, but the guy who should be angry about it is no longer commander-in-chief, and sorry, it's going to be up to
Right, and
Biden.
In fact, if he had to do that because Trump was really unhinged, why are we not hearing about it from more people who were inside?
Yes, maybe now the opportunity arises.
Right.
We'll see. Yes, thank you for reminding me that, a major constitutional crisis was in the news yesterday as well.
All right. Anyway, there's that. So take care, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Okay. Oh, no, you won't. I won't be on the air tomorrow.
Okay. Then I'll
but it was a
talk
nice
to you
try.
on Monday.
Yes. How about that? Why don't we do it then instead? I have a thing tomorrow. How's Monday for you?
Monday should be okay. I have to check with the French Laundry to see whether I have any other household chores to do.
Right. Well, you Eastern elites, I know how it is for you guys, by which I mean Northeastern elites. I'm not northern enough to be an Eastern anymore. Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Yeah, so we'll have to hold on until Monday before we talk again. I'm glad that's all the more reason to get all those extra stories in before you left. Oh, right. And there it is. All right. Court-martial. Oh, she fixed it.
Yeah.
All right.
She deleted the misspelling where she said court-martial, like Marshall of the Supreme Court.
Right. Yes.
Marshal.
I thought she was telling Mark Milley to court some guy named Marshall.
Yeah, well, don't ask, but if you do, hopefully it works out for both of you.
That's right. Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. And check in with you next week, where probably nothing exciting will happen between now and then.
Right. Take care.
Thank you. Will do. All right. Yes. So tomorrow, big day in Judaism. In case you weren't paying attention, or you don't have a NAFTA calendar, or you didn't want to think about it. But yeah, I'll be, not only will I be doing that big day thing, but I have to. I mean, I've mentioned this on the air, right? I've been I have found myself president of the congregation. Not through active campaigning so much as, hey, a lot of things need to be done here, and it's been someone else's turn for a very long time, and they would like to step back now, and somebody else needs to do this stuff. And I looked around, and there wasn't anybody. And they said, well, how about if you do it? And I said, no, yes, I guess. So here I am. So I'm kind of expected to show for tomorrow. Not like the whole thing, the whole enterprise doesn't fall apart if I'm not there, but that's the way it goes. So big day for Judaism, and I'll be observing. And that's why. And others will be contemplating quietly at home, which is a good idea, given, the resurgence of the Delta virus and everything. We're doing a very small scale thing, and mostly I think the bulk of our attendees will be online Zoom attendees. But somebody's got to show up to put on the show for the people watching at home, is essentially what it is. I know that's a little dismissive of some, solemn and worshipful proceedings, but that's how we roll on today's show. All right. Yeah, I do. I think we ought to get back to the Mark Milley question and the Dan Quayle questions and all of that. I don't know how much more of that I have stored away, but it's amazing. That's, I guess, testament to how big the news is out of California, that we were distracted by all the other happenings for so long that it only ended up being an afterthought. The French Laundry of today's issues, I guess. I view the thing as very differently than Casey Hunt does. But anyway, all right, time now for the music to bring us to the break, for me to go back into Pocket and take a look and see what other things I had for use today. Oh yeah, there are some other very interesting and shocking stories. Definitely going to bring up. And there's the Caitlyn Jenner screen cap I was looking for. 1.1%, not even 1.9%, like approaching 2. No, 1.1%. 55,747 votes, which is actually a tremendous number. Can't believe that many people thought she ought to be governor. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's run through the subjects. Mighty OCD, come on here. I remember, he says, back when Kagro X used to work a whole week at a time. You don't think I feel bad about this? I don't like to leave everybody behind. And by the way, yeah, so tomorrow very likely to end up being a rerun. Ordinarily, I would perhaps press things, and who knows? Maybe there'll be so many stories that I felt that we just couldn't leave out but couldn't get to today that I have to record at least a shortened show, and I guess I still have that option available. But I have to deliver a speech of sorts tonight because on account of ending up being the president. It's kind of a weird thing. I don't know if all congregations do this. It strikes me as an odd time to have to do this during the Kol Nidre service, which, I think our thoughts ought to be elsewhere, perhaps, but I don't know. I'll endeavor to bring our thoughts around to where they ought to be and give it some thematic value. But, I got a lot of responsibility all of a sudden. And between August, it's just the timing's bad. The timing's lousy. I'm sorry. It's not you, it's me. But August vacation, early high holy days, and then, of course, family emergencies as well. And it all just came at once, and I feel like I'm off the air all the time. And believe me, I'm thinking about it. But I'm not doing anything about it, so there you go. I have to be off the air. That's just one of those things. There's a pandemic on. There would be cover for striking me dead, for smiting me. Be able to blame it on the COVID, right? And when everybody knows that obviously it would be the hand of God. Anyway, all I'm saying is I'm just not going to be there tomorrow. And he is saying, like, the several-year-old reruns are kind of cool, even though. So, all right. That's, those were fun, especially when we had the call-ins way back when. But that technology kind of fell apart on us, unfortunately. All right, let's see. So other stories that I wanted to make mention of. Here's one that would likely otherwise fall through the cracks because there are so many big stories out there creating such large cracks. But this is some interest. I saw let's see, did I put any of the tweets away? Some of them. But I saw, I guess, Adam Serwer tweeting on this morning and pointing to a story about it and, just basically saying that how outrageous the whole situation was. We may or may not have made mention of this at the time. But a big story. Let me let NBC News tell the story in the most basic fashion. Not NBC News as a whole necessarily, but David K. Lee in particular telling the story. Philadelphia to pay $2 million to black woman beaten by officers and separated from toddler during unrest. It's a little, I don't know if it brings back the memory for you. It's a little unclear, but I think once you hear the story, you'll say, I do remember that happened. And how nice to get this as a follow-up, I guess. Subheader to the article here reads, officers smashed Rikia, I guess Rickia, Rikia Young's car windows, with batons when she unknowingly drove into a protest. The police union, later claimed on social media that officers rescued her, quote, lost toddler. And right on the spot, right at the time, the tweet records show, people knew that this was BS and called it out correctly right away. And this woman found competent representation and sued and won. The city of Philadelphia will pay $2 million that they should not have ever had to pay to a black woman who was pulled from a car, beaten by officers, and had her toddler used for social media fodder by the police union, officials said. Do you remember the fodder that they used? I think it's all covered in the story. It was really quite amazing. But let me read on. Nursing aide Rikia Young was heading home in the early morning hours of October 27th, 2020. So just under a year ago, when she unknowingly drove into a large protest over the police killing of Walter Wallace Jr., one of the many protests all over the country last year. Not, just necessarily in reaction to George Floyd, but, there are killings all over the place. And, unfortunately, the police create those opportunities fairly frequently. So anyway, as we were saying, it wasn't somebody driving into a protest like, either trying to get through it or aiming to run down the protesters. It was somebody who was driving home. There was a protest in the street, and she said, "Oh, I better not drive down this road." She tried to make a 3-point turn to get away from the tense scene when the police officers, who, are supposedly there to protect everybody, right, saw her turning around. And, this is inexplicable. Right? Ordinarily, if you're driving down, the cops will point at you and turn and point in the other direction and say, turn around and get out of here. Without being prompted to do so, she went and did that. But I guess they were offended that she didn't wait for instruction, or maybe just their instinct, which was completely wrong, was, oh, here's somebody trying to get away from us. That must mean they're guilty of something. I have no idea what would drive them to do this. She tries to make a 3-point turn to get away from the scene. Officers then smash out her windows with their batons, and they pull her out of the car, and they beat her, and they take away, her toddler son is in the back, and I guess also a nephew is in the car. I'll read on here. Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney called the treatment of Young absolutely appalling and inexcusable, which of course it is, and there's no words. This terrible incident, which should never have happened to anyone, only further strained the relationship between the police and the community, Kenney said in a statement. The officers' inexcusable actions that evening prompted an immediate and thorough investigation of the incident and for personnel to be disciplined and held accountable for their egregious conduct. I hope that the settlement and investigations into the officers' actions bring some measure of closure to Miss Young and her family. One can only hope. Some measure, and that's all that there will be. Young was handcuffed and separated from her teenage nephew and 2-year-old son for several hours, and no one was ever charged or cited, according to the woman's lawyer. The hearing-impaired toddler, just to make things worse, lost his hearing aids during the tussle. The Fraternal Order of Police, the nation's largest police labor union, huge anti-vaxxers as it turns out, by the way, posted a Facebook picture 2 days later showing Young's toddler in the arms of a Philadelphia police officer just after the incident. And here's what they posted along with it. This child was lost during the violent riots in Philadelphia, wandering around barefoot in an area that was experiencing complete lawlessness, the union said on Facebook. The only thing this Philadelphia police officer cared about in that moment was protecting this child. All a total lie, by the way. And the post was later taken down. Oops, my bad. We lied. Of course, you now know the background. That child wasn't wandering around barefoot. That child was on his way home with his mother in a car, seeking to avoid being involved in any kind of trouble whatsoever, when cops spotted them and said, "There goes someone trying to avoid trouble. Let's give it to them." The cops rioted and smashed this woman's windows out and pulled that kid from the car, and then took the picture and posed for it and said, "Look how kind we are, intervening in the lives of our troubled charges here in Philadelphia." Unbelievable. So anyway, the post was taken down. 2 Philadelphia policemen, an officer and a sergeant, have since been fired, thank God, in connection to the treatment of Young, a city spokesperson says. Anyway, the behavior that occurred during the interaction between Rikia Young, her nephew, her son, and some of the officers on the scene violated the mission of the police department, the Philadelphia Police Department. It violated all kinds of things: Constitution, civil rights, human rights, but also the mission of the Philadelphia Police Department. According to, of course, Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw, which is, a hello, Matrix glitch. Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw. All right. As a matter of fact, the ability for officers and supervisors on the scene to defuse the situation was abandoned, and instead of fighting crime and the fear of crime, some of the officers on the scene created an environment that terrorized Rikia Young, her family, and other members of the public. You almost got it on the nose there. If I could just offer one small rewrite, the ability for officers and supervisors on the scene to defuse the situation was abandoned. And instead of fighting crime and the fear of crime, some of the officers on the scene committed crime. That's right. Instead of quelling the riot, some officers on the scene started a riot. That's what was missing from this statement. But okay, it's the commissioner. Perhaps she can't go that far for political reasons. Representatives of both the National Fraternal Order of Police and Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 5, which represents Philadelphia officers, did not immediately return messages seeking their comments on Tuesday. But we don't really need their comment on Tuesday. They're wrong. They're guilty. Some people got fired. Probably some people who needed to get fired didn't get fired. This was a total outrage. And I'm glad to see that there was at least a settlement in favor of the family, and I hope, like the mayor, that it brings them some measure of closure anyway. And yeah, it's now, of course, turned into a how it started, how it's going meme out there on Twitter as well. I saw, whose tweet is this so I can credit it properly? Stu, who tweets as Dyson Doc, DYSONDOC. I, happened across it this morning. Happened at random. Somebody thought it was an interesting one. So how it started versus how it's going. The screen-capped Fraternal Order of Police post, now since deleted, with the infamous photo of I guess the one female officer that they could find to give a maternal look to this whole thing is holding the boy, who, again, I remind you, is hearing impaired and has lost his hearing aids and is probably frightened out of his mind and deprived of one of his key senses, is clinging to this officer in the hopes that the things that he learned in, probably in his preschool about, if you're scared and in danger, a police officer can actually help you. Hoping against hope that that's true, because, of course, this child was just pulled from a car where the exact opposite was evidenced to be true. Maybe he's, I hope for his own psychological sake, that he's clinging to the officer in the traditional blue uniform here. And if there's any hope in the world of this being true, maybe I don't. Maybe I need to, for him. Maybe it's better that he know the truth. But maybe the riot-geared, black-clad police officers weren't associated in his mind with the police. But that's who they were. So I guess I can't be too worried if the truth actually made it in. But anyway, here's the FOP's post. This child was lost during the violent riots in Philadelphia. Well, we read this whole thing about this. The only thing this Philadelphia police officer cared about in that moment was protecting this child. And maybe it's even true. Maybe this officer was like, oh my God, these people are insane and they're my colleagues. And the least I could do is rescue the child from this. But that didn't stop the union from using it for propaganda purposes. They also added this kicker. We are not your enemy. We are the thin blue line. And we are the only thing standing between order and anarchy, which also is a gigantic lie. And I don't know how many, probably about, I would venture to say close to zero, if not zero. I'm just guessing. Could be totally wrong. It's totally a prejudicial statement to say this. Are there probably zero of the officers involved in that incident who are going to be responsible for some personal atonement tomorrow, and will would feel obligated religiously to observe tomorrow, let's say, as such an opportunity? But if there are any, you got a lot of work to do. We are not your enemy. We are the thin blue line, and we are the only thing standing between order and anarchy. Unless, of course, we are the anarchy, which was the case here. I thought we were the order, but it turns out we were the anarchy. It's really about the best spin you could possibly put on this thing. I thought she was definitely a terrorist, and therefore it was a good idea for me to pull her out of the car, handcuff her, and beat her, and, oh, here's a toddler. Well, let's get one of these women officers over here, and maybe we can make this thing better. Maybe there's an opportunity for us. And, of course, as many people were pointing out, the officer unmasked during the mid-pandemic times, and probably not a good idea anyway. So how's it going? Then a screenshot of the NBC News tweet informing us all that the city of Philadelphia will pay $2 million to a black woman. She's pictured here, and now we know who she is, right? Rikia Young. Pulled from a car, beaten by officers, had her toddler used for social media fodder by the police union, officials say. So, outrage of the day. I think clear winner, but at least a good result here. All right. Switching gears, because that's all I have for this gear, I think. But following up on Larry Elder, the fact that the recall was crushed, and the fact that Larry Elder switched teams, and became a pro-fraudster because he thought that was his ticket to the top of the heap of Republican candidates in the recall election. And he thought he might just be able to ride the weird recall rules to political power, and changed his mind and became a fraudster. I mentioned yesterday that it was revealed that the Elder campaign had put up on its website some text that people were meant to use to be able to copy and paste into letters to elections officials, claiming that they had evidence, clear evidence and proof that the fraud had occurred. The fraud that Larry Elder originally didn't believe in, then changed his mind and told everybody he did believe in, and then last night, having been crushed, decided that he no longer believed in. But that people were being prompted to write these letters and say, I definitely have evidence of fraud that I totally saw, even though at the time that the text was published and suggested to them, the results hadn't been tabulated, and so there was no basis on which to draw any conclusion of fraud because there was no data. There was never any basis, of course, for the fraud claim, but there was no data to even misinterpret yet. Well, anyway, Nick Riccardi, an AP reporter here, AP Western political writer, reports a little extra on this, a little news on Larry Elder's petition claiming fraud in the recall before votes are counted. Significant parts were, in fact, copied and pasted from a petition supporting Lynn Wood's lawsuit last year against Georgia election results. That one, of course, like most of them, most of the 60 pro-Trump lawsuits, 60-plus suits that were filed in federal court and elsewhere, also trounced. Just like the recall, they didn't even make it past the filings. The papers were filed and the cases were dismissed immediately. Let's see. There's, I guess, there's an article attached, but then also a screen grab probably from the article. All right, let me go and take a look and see if we can. I'm going to have to click through. Did I put the article away as well? Let me see if I can back up to that. I don't think I did. So we could just read, if I go to the original of the tweet, we can probably get to the headline wasn't super exciting. GOP pushes unfounded fraud claims before California recall, from KRON TV, but I guess the screen grab should sum it up. The Elder campaign promoted fraud claims over the weekend, pointing to a website that urges people to sign a petition saying he's lost an election that isn't over yet. The language in the initial paragraph and final sentence of the petition is identical to that on petitions circulated online by attorney Lynn Wood backing his lawsuit to overturn Biden's win in Georgia last year. Wood, who was recently sanctioned by a federal judge for his role in a separate lawsuit challenging Biden's win in Michigan last year, said those petitions were drafted by staff at his organization and that he had no role in the petition that Elder circulated. I had no knowing involvement in the California petition, Wood said, and he probably didn't. What's really happening here is the note that Wood's Georgia lawsuit was dismissed, but the conspiracy theories in that complaint and dozens of other unsuccessful pro-Trump litigation helped fuel the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. And Larry Elder said, cut that S and paste it into my website. That's what I want to have happen. Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting and good. I'm glad he's sneaking away with his tail between his legs, except I hope that someone kicks him down the stairs on his way out. Okay. Different direction now. Perhaps wise to head off into another direction. More on Donald Trump himself being a filthy, filthy, grifting thief and someone deserving of our scorn and perhaps the harshest punishment our legal system might be able to mete out. And David Farenthold involved in this one, but he's got some help on the byline here. In fact, first on the byline, Shana Jacobs. Farenthold listed second here. Jonathan O'Connell and Josh Dawsey adding to the work as well. Trump Tower's key tenants have fallen behind on rent and moved out. There's no more benefit to bribing him through rent at Trump Tower, so they gave up. But Trump has one reliable customer, his own PAC. Yeah. That's what's going on here. I'll read you the story. You'll figure it out. Inside Trump Tower, swank suit maker Marcraft Clothes once rented the entire 18th floor, outfitting its offices with fireplaces, mahogany-lined closets, and 2 bars for schmoozing customers. But then Marcraft fell $664,000 behind on rent and went out of business last year, its assets having dwindled to $40.75 in a checking account and 1,200 damaged coats, according to court filings. Just sort of some color commentary on that. One floor up, a business school once led by Kardashian family matriarch Kris Jenner was consumed by lawsuits, falling $198,000 behind on payments to Trump Tower by October of 2020, according to court papers. And on the 21st and 22nd floors, the company that made Ivanka Trump shoes racked up $1.5 million in unpaid rent, according to a lawsuit that the Trump Organization filed this year. I mean, these stories by themselves would be fascinating, and there are some linked stories, and I could probably spend the rest of the week. In fact, maybe this is what I can do for a Thursday show. I don't know how interesting you'll all find that. I should have sprung it on you by surprise instead. But the subtext to me in all of this is, one, Trump Tower still, there's stiff competition from Pervalago and now the Bedminster golf course as well for the title of Earth's Mos Eisley. But I still think Trump Tower wins out. It's full of fraud. Everybody in it is a fraudster. I don't think there's an honest tenant. I'm broad sweeping, terrible thing to say. Gonna atone for it tomorrow, but it's a real question mark. Is there an honest tenant in Trump Tower? Again, I don't know anything about Marcraft clothes. Maybe they did what they did and they did it honestly and they just ran out of clients because there was a pandemic and nobody would go there to, schmooze around, even though there was a nice bar and everything, and get their clothes made. People were staying home. I don't know. Maybe there was just no market for it. Maybe they were grifters. I have no idea. But what's interesting to me is the veneer that people were looking for when they make the decision to rent in Trump Tower. They're clearly, I don't know. To me, it's a 50-50 proposition. Either you're a real business or you're in the fake it till you make it category. And if we just rent at Trump Tower, it'll look like we're a successful business. Of course they're successful. Imagine what they're paying to rent in Trump Tower. It's the lap of luxury. But the whole thing is a facade, top to bottom. And second of all, I don't know, like I said, I don't know anything about Marcraft. Blank slate. I don't have to tell you too much. They didn't have to tell me anything for me to form an opinion. Could I be wrong? Sure. Will I have to atone for it if I am? Maybe not on this one. A business school once led by Kardashian family matriarch Kris Jenner. Fraud! It's a fraud. I don't know anything about it. But it was a business school that fell behind in rent by $198,000. So what kind of business were they teaching? Unless it was, efficient breach. This is, a legitimate law and economics concept. But probably not in this case. And then, of course, the Ivanka Trump shoe thing. Well, one, it's associated with Ivanka Trump. Fraud. Secondly, specifically, Ivanka Trump's shoe business was full of fraud. They were copying designs from people. And then the company that made Ivanka Trump shoes falls $1.5 million behind in rent. One, they're, I guess, probably, maybe they're honest somehow. Well, yes, we're cheating on the design of the shoes, but we pay our bills, or we strive to anyway. And we just couldn't because pandemic, supply chain collapsed. I don't know. But you would think, I guess, again, the show here is, well, the veneer of wealth and success and Ivanka Trump. And of course, why is the company that makes Ivanka's wildly successful line of internationally recognized shoes $1.5 million behind in rent? And it's because they suck and the shoes are awful and nobody buys that crap. And Ivanka's been lying through her teeth about the success of the line because it makes her look like not a failure. That's the probable truth. There's a linked story for the Kardashian thing. There's a linked story for Ivanka Trump shoe thing. I'd love to read them, but I'm not done with the start here yet. Through all of that, as Trump Tower has dealt with imploding tenants, political backlash, and a broader pandemic-related slump in Manhattan office leasing since last year, it has been able to count on one reliable, well, whatever, I guess relatively speaking, reliable, high-paying tenant, and that is former President Donald Trump's own political operation. There is nothing going on in that PAC, and they don't need any of the space that they have, and they certainly don't need for that space to be in Trump Tower, but it is. Why? Because it's money laundering. Money that went into that PAC that can't legally go directly into Donald Trump's pocket is filtered through the rent, pushed through the rent filter and laundered into money that Trump can actually pocket for himself. So he's doing it, and he needs to do it because his Trump Tower flagship business is failing, and so is everything in it. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This story has me closer to breaking the cursing rules than anyone so far. And it's not like it was unknown. It's just, I guess because it was so obvious all this time, and now we have a chance to discuss it, and we see how disgusting Trump and Trump Tower all around really are. It makes me want to let loose. But yeah, I mean, this is pointing at 2, maybe 3 tenants who may or may not be total grifters themselves, but probably are based on who's involved in these enterprises. But yeah, between that and, let's see, the Russian mobsters who've bought floors on Trump Tower and who were later busted in international gambling arrests, et cetera, et cetera. The old soccer officials, CONCACAF, is that right? Anyway, the soccer association of the American the Americas, the FIFA of the Americas, essentially, and the guy who lived and had an apartment for his cats. Everybody's disgusting in this place. So where were we? Yes, right. So he's laundering money from his PAC to line his own pockets and, I guess, pretend that his flagship enterprise isn't a total failure, even though everybody who's in it is a failure. Everything Trump touches dies, including businesses that rent space in Trump Tower. And I guess in some cases there's still some that survive, and we hope, maybe it's a great idea if, like, say, the Bank of China fails, or maybe it brings, international economic collapse and widespread misery and famine to billions in China, and would be bad. I don't know. We'll wait and see. We won't wish anything on them at this point. But worth reminding everybody that the Bank of China it was an important business client of Trump's for all of his yelling and screaming. And the video I still circulate nightly of him promising free Regeneron to everyone. China did this, and they're going to pay a big price for what they did. And the big price is rent in my building. So, that's where his heart lies. Starting in March, back to the story. Starting in March, one of his committees, the Make America Great Again PAC, brilliantly named, paid $37,551, $541, I got that right, wrong, $37,541.67 per month to rent office space on the 15th floor of Trump Tower, a space previously rented by his campaign, according to campaign finance filings and a person familiar with the Political Action Committee. So in other words, First, he used the campaign to launder campaign money into his pockets by renting space from himself at exorbitant prices. And then when the campaign ended, is when he decided, oh, well, that cash cow can no longer be milked. How about these other ones, the PACs? Let's move them into the office. And nobody needs that office. And wasn't the 15th floor of Trump Tower that they used for the campaign space that he previously rented to the production company for The Apprentice? I think so. So these offices have always been involved in grift for him. Thank you to Monica, who says that CONCACAF is the FIFA for North and Central America and the Caribbean. CONMEBOL is for South America. So not all of the Americas, just two of them, Central and North. South America, you're on your own. And no big deal for them. They probably would insist on being on their own. They're much better at soccer. So, okay. So that's what's going on there. The CONMEBOL folks probably lived in Trump Tower, Buenos Aires, but I don't know that for sure. All right. The situation in Trump Tower in New York currently, right, 15th floor, used to be The Apprentice, became the campaign. Then when that cash cow died, they moved the PAC in there instead. Now, this may not be the most efficient use of donors' money. A person familiar with Trump's PAC said that its staffers do not regularly use the office space. Also, for several months, Trump's PAC paid the Trump Organization $3,000 per month to rent a retail kiosk in the tower's lobby, even though the lobby was closed. COVID. Campaign finance experts said the payments do not appear to be illegal. This kind of PAC has very few restrictions and no expiration date, so Trump is free to spend its money at his own properties as long as he wants, which is why he started these PACs in the first place. It's not illegal, it's just super shady. But they said Trump is continuing a practice that was a hallmark of his presidency by exploiting loose regulations and his own supporters' trust to convert political donations into private revenue for himself. He's running a con, said Paul S. Ryan, not that one, but the other one, Paul S. Ryan, a campaign finance expert at the watchdog group Common Cause. Talking about political expenses, but in reality, raising money for self-enrichment. That's what's going on. The Trump Organization did not respond to questions. A spokeswoman for Trump's political operation, Liz Harrington, defended the spending. We are paying market rate for leased office space used to help President Trump build a financial juggernaut to help elect America First conservatives and flip both the House and Senate to the Republicans in the midterm elections, Harrington said. That's what she has to say. Harrington said that the PAC has also paid for the lobby kiosk for several months, even though the lobby was closed, because it had inherited the kiosk from Trump's 2020 campaign, and all of the campaign merchandise was still in the space. Harrington said officials expected the lobby to reopen, but when it remained closed, the PAC stopped paying. The last payment was made in early May. They couldn't pick up the merchandise and move it anywhere because that can't happen for reasons unknown. Trump Tower, the 58-story glass tower on Fifth Avenue, served for years as Trump's primary home, the headquarters of his business, and a kind of physical avatar of his success. It was the set for TV's The Apprentice and the backdrop for Trump's announcement of his 2016 presidential campaign. But in its midsection, Trump Tower is something more prosaic. A Manhattan office building with 12 floors available for lease. The Trump Organization's headquarters occupies 2 other office floors. The leased floors serve as part of the collateral for one of Trump's biggest outstanding debts, by the way. A $100 million loan with the full amount, how does that even happen? The full amount due next year, $100 million. $100 million, and no payments made on it. It's all due at once. One big balloon payment. Amazing. This, according to data kept by the real estate analysis firm TREP, about whom I know nothing. Trump, not TREP, but Trump still owns his businesses, including this one, but says that his sons, Eric and Donald, Eric and Donald Trump Jr., manage them day to day. So those are the guys looking at the $100 million payment, you see, not me. To assess the financial health of Trump Tower and the importance of the revenue it receives from Trump's own PAC, the Washington Post examined filings with New York taxing authorities, as well as loan documents, campaign finance records, and lawsuits involving Trump Tower tenants. In the years before he became president, Trump reported to New York City that the tower's office spaces produced income of between $8 and $11 million per year in rent. Those filings were obtained by the Post after a public records request. The most recent filing that the city provided to the Post covered 2017. The Post could not find detailed figures on rental income from the office spaces after that. And of course, that's one we would be interested in. Does COVID impact things? Does it all collapse? And more importantly, I think probably is the impact of the last election. Now that you can no longer bribe the president of the United States with exorbitant rents, did people bother to stay? Especially when they had the cover of pointing to COVID and saying, it's not that we don't still love you, Mr. Trump. It's that COVID has killed us and we got to go. Most recent filings, I guess, are only up to 2017 that the Post has gotten. But it is clear from some of Trump's customers that some of Trump's customers have recently fallen into turmoil and at times ended up behind on their rent, which is weird because everybody in Trump Tower is super successful. One was Marcraft, the clothing maker that offered $1,400 Trump-branded suits in the heyday of The Apprentice. So now I do know something about Marcraft. I know that, which I just read, and it tells me, yep, that's probably a shady enterprise as well. Its 18th floor suite included a golden Buddha in the elevator lobby and a bar decorated with a colorful light display for after-hour cocktail parties. According to an archived news release from its architects, it was luxe enough that the New York Times wrote about it in 2006. Probably in one of those features where it's getting tougher and tougher for middle-class people earning $600,000 to $800,000 a year to keep up their payments to remain members of Marcraft so that they could buy $1,400 Trump-branded suits. And how are you supposed to do both that and childcare on only $800,000 a year in New York City? Okay, potential customers look at it with the feeling, this is Marcraft stuff, you are cool. This is interesting. A Marcraft executive told the Times. There's brilliant marketing pitches. We want people to look at our suits and say, you are cool. This is interesting. Not those stupid intellectual suits with elbow patches. Anyway, but Marcraft fell on hard times. Who would have guessed it? Last year, it entered insolvency proceedings in New Jersey. Interestingly enough, a kind of state court version of bankruptcy, saying in court filings that it had more than $30 million in debts, including $664,000 in unpaid rent at Trump Tower. It was, for lack of a better word, a carcass, said Morris Bauer, a New Jersey attorney whom the company assigned to take over its meager assets and deal with its creditors. Bauer said he wasn't sure what happened to the Trump Tower suite, but he knew Marcraft had vacated it. The company, Bauer said, exists in name, but it is not operating. One floor up from Marcraft on Trump Tower's 19th floor are the offices of the Legacy Business School, which once boasted Kris Jenner as its chairwoman. She reportedly resigned a few months after the school opened in 2016. When Trump was big and famous and ascendant and you could cash in on it. The school is expensive. Its $70,000 annual tuition is $19,000 higher than Harvard University's. But Harvard doesn't hold classes in Trump Tower. It is not just an educational campus, the school's website said, making the tower one of its main selling points. It is studying at the most powerful building in the world. You got that? It's the most powerful building in the world. What are they capitalizing on? But that school also appears to have fallen into turmoil. Turmoil is an interesting catch-all phrase here for this. Bankruptcy, insolvency, sinking under the weight of its own fraud. In February, investors who claimed to be the legacy's majority owners, and the fact that that's even in question makes you wonder, what kind of business school is this again? We haven't even clearly established who's the majority owner of this place, sued the school's founder, Alessandro Nomelini, demanding that Nomelini give up control of the school and its offices. The investors included documents showing that as of last year, the school owed $198,000 in unpaid rent, taxes, and fees to Trump Tower. They asked the judge to cancel the lease entirely. Nomelini has challenged those claims in court. I guess if he stops paying rent at Trump Tower, or at least accruing the debt, then someone will break his legs. Nomelini's attorneys declined to comment to the Post, and then on Wednesday asked to withdraw from the case, saying that Nomelini had not paid their bills. Nomelini himself did not respond to questions from the Post. Another major Trump Tower tenant, occupying all of the 21st floor and part of the 22nd floor, had been Mark Fisher Footwear, the manufacturer of shoes for Ivanka Trump's now shuttered brand, and others. But earlier this year, the Trump Organization sued Mark Fisher Footwear for unpaid rent. The suit said the shoemaker had stopped paying rent in November of 2020, and it owed more than $1.4 million. The lawsuit was settled on undisclosed terms in April. A person familiar with the suit said that Mark Fisher Footwear had vacated the spaces in Trump Tower. The firm did not respond to requests for comment from the Post. Trump Tower does have office tenants still in place. Gucci still rents the massive retail space facing Fifth Avenue. The foundation of Trump friend Stuart Rahr, Stewie Rah-Rah, king of all fun, right? We remember him from the early days of probing the disgustingness of Mos Eisley. The foundation of Stuart Rahr still occupies space on the 24th floor, according to its website. The hops seller, Hopsteiner, moved in, so they're new. The Industrial and Commercial Bank of China still rents office space, though it reportedly downsized in 2019. The bank did not respond to questions from the Post. In the first quarter of this year, the last for which data was available, Trump Tower's commercial spaces were 75% occupied, according to TREP data. That is lower than the occupancy rates for the tower from any year going back to 2013, TREP reported. Citywide, this is not a good time to be trying to lease out office space. The effects of the coronavirus pandemic, combined with the construction of new buildings, have created an unusual glut of available space. A recent report by the firm Savills, S-A-V-I-L-L-S, found that 18.4% of Manhattan office space was for rent, the highest level in decades. One office has remained rented and producing income throughout this tumultuous time, Suite 1501. This 5,490 square foot space was leased for years by Trump's 2020 campaign, even though the campaign's main headquarters was in Virginia. After Trump left office, his PAC moved in. According to the person familiar with the PAC, the person spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the committee's finances and didn't want to get indicted. The rate Trump's PAC is paying Trump's company for space in Trump's Tower, you see what's going on here, appears to be about $85 per square foot annually. Now that's close to the average for Midtown Manhattan, according to Savills, though it's less than the $122 per square foot that Trump got from Mark Fisher Footwear. At Trump Tower, the former president's PAC appears to be a quiet tenant under typical office conditions, with about one worker per 175 square feet, that much space might hold 30 people. But the PAC's latest campaign finance filing only listed 3 employees at that address as of June. And even those 3 don't always work there, according to the person familiar with the PAC. They work from home or follow Trump to his clubs in Palm Beach and Bedminster. Even when Trump does visit Trump Tower, the person said, he doesn't use the PAC's rented space. He works out of his old office up on the Trump Organization's headquarters on the 25th and 26th floors. One recent weekday, a Post reporter sought to visit the PAC's office, but was turned away by a security guard who said there was no point. Nobody would be there. Even if Trump's PAC was a loud tenant, it seems unlikely that the neighbors would even notice. Trump's own marketing materials indicate the other office space on the 15th floor is vacant. So there you go. It's a fraud from top to bottom. And now you know about one of his latest schemes to steal the campaign money and keep it for himself. I think we already knew it. We knew in our hearts that was going on. And now we know it in our heads because of the intrepid reporting of the crew at the Washington Post. There's lots to read about the shady business school that Kris Jenner was connected with. But I guess because the fact that she, quit it in 2016, it's not that exciting anymore. But the Daily Beast has like a whole slew of stories about it. And it's really kind of interesting looking. But I think we'll leave it at that for now. But this goes back to, when were these articles written? I don't know. Because they're paywalled and I can only see parts of it for a second. But I'll tell you what pops up if you look at it in the view, the pocket view. Kris Jenner and the shady crew behind her $105,000 a year business school. That's even higher than what did they say, $70,000 tuition that they were talking about earlier. Brandy Zadrozny and Ben Collins are at least on the byline in the pocket view, which is sometimes weird and inaccurate. But anyway, this is like a 3-part article. So the first one is titled Kris Jenner and the Shady Crew Behind the $105,000 a year business school. Part 2, linked in here, is What Trump Knew About Kardashian U. And an update, Kris Jenner U scrubs its social media after Daily Beast expose. Then part 3, How the School for Gods Seduced America. I didn't even realize they had been seduced. I'm kind of curious about how they come to call themselves the School of Gods. But it looks very long and complex, this installation of it, and that doesn't even get to what Trump knew about it. And what if I read all of this thing and it turns out that Trump knew nothing about it? So I don't know. I'll have to sort of preview it on my own time and see whether it's worth diving back in there. All right, just a few more minutes here for us to try and fit something in. Would I be able to get through this one or not? I don't think so. If their own estimate of how long it takes to read this thing is any indication. So perhaps I save that for later. But I look at what's going on over at the Supreme Court from Ian Millhiser, always worth hearing from in questions about the court. And let's see. This is something I put aside for, a Greg Sargent piece from the other day. The headline, as I recall, I saw him tweeting about it and talking about an excerpt from his own article. And I clicked through and the headline seemed like, hey, this is about something different. It's Chris Wallace's grilling of a GOP governor exposes a much bigger scam. But it doesn't hint right away at what that scam is. But let's read this piece, or at least what we can of it, before we run out of time and see what it was. I think I remember what the nugget was. I hope I get to it. When Chris Wallace grilled the Republican governor of Nebraska over his opposition to vaccine mandates on Sunday, the Fox News anchor did a fine job of exposing the incoherence of one of the GOP lawmakers, of one GOP's lawmakers, positioning on the issue. But this moment is bigger than that. Wallace also helped expose a larger scam that Republicans have been running in the vaccine debate for some time now. Indeed, they've employed a similar scam on electoral outcomes too. This is a great parallel. So all this should be understood as a larger mode of political conduct that deserves broad scrutiny in its own right as a big story about this moment. Good, I love big stories. I love when they're told in short fashion, though. Call it a reverse confidence game. In it, the swindler convinces his marks that they must not have confidence in the matter at issue. The federal vaccine program, electoral outcomes, whatever. Right? He simultaneously treats that lack of confidence as an inevitable fact of life and as justification for the political project that follows. Opposing vaccine mandates, for instance, or unleashing voter suppression laws. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts, in his exchange with Wallace, illustrates this two-step. Discussing President Biden's new vaccine mandate proposals, Wallace noted that many other vaccines are already mandated and then asked what's different about the coronavirus vaccine mandates. Ricketts claimed that with those other vaccines, a long history built up trust among parents. By contrast, in the case of the coronavirus, parents don't know who to trust. That's a quote. Don't know who to trust because federal health officials have supposedly, quote, flip-flopped on vaccines and masks. And video of the exchange is embedded here. Catch the sleight of hand there? Ricketts treats it as a natural fact of life that people lack confidence in federal officials overseeing national vaccination efforts, then uses that as justification for opposing vaccine mandates. But Ricketts himself essentially endorses the idea that people have good reason to lack confidence in the feds on vaccines. After Ricketts insisted the only way to rebuild trust is to refrain from vaccine mandates, Wallace noted that the COVID vaccine now has full federal approval and that polio vaccines were mandated at the outset. But the critical point here is that Republicans such as Ricketts are themselves actively undermining people's trust in vaccines while piously citing that mistrust as the basis for opposing mandates. Importantly, Republicans have played this game for months. Though a good number have urged vaccines, in some cases they simultaneously try to tacitly discourage confidence about them out of the other side of their mouths. Senator Josh Hawley, for instance, has opposed vaccine mandates on the grounds that Biden's now notorious comments about door-to-door vaccine outreach were understandably alarming to people, meaning mandates will alarm them only further. Hawley doesn't tell his supporters that his alarm about Biden's comments is utterly baseless. He validates it. Similarly, Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas has declared that, quote, every time Biden officials speak about COVID-19, 10,000 more people say, I'm never going to take the vaccine. Here again, Marshall validates distrust. If people don't trust vaccines, that's understandable because the feds aren't to be trusted. Beyond this, of course, other Republicans and their media allies have gone to great lengths to undermine confidence in vaccines. We've seen ridiculous lies about administration needle Nazis and about vaccines as a slippery slope to Bible confiscation, as well as an aggressive campaign to spread vaccine disinformation by right-wing media personalities. How often do Republican lawmakers call this sort of thing out, let alone tell their supporters that they should disregard it? None of this means the Biden administration is blameless for this distrust. Far from it. Many mistakes and inconsistencies marred public communication about the response. Biden did jump the gun in declaring COVID defeated, likely undermining confidence, and the administration was too slow in leaning into the need for vaccine mandates. Nonetheless, the point stands. Republicans could reasonably criticize the government's mistakes, but clarify there are now grounds for confidence in the federal vaccine program. Instead, they regularly seek to exacerbate distrust themselves, validate the distrust that the deception from their own ranks has produced, and then magically convert this into justification for further opposition to all vaccine mandates. We've seen the same game on election outcomes. Many Republicans have employed the canard that voters, quote, lack confidence in the 2020 outcome and in elections more generally to justify escalated voter suppression everywhere. Some have even used this to justify sham post-election audits and to justify efforts to subvert Biden's electoral college votes in Congress. Of course, these things are themselves designed to further undermine that very confidence in our election system. In the case of vaccines, all this is exacerbated by media coverage that mostly focuses on the failure of good faith, if sometimes insufficiently pointed, efforts by Biden and Democrats to overcome all this distrust. The coverage neglects the active bad faith efforts by Republicans and their media allies to harden that same distrust. Yeah, well, there's a lot more here. Let me see what I can fit in. Does this mean Republicans are engaged in a fully organized party-wide effort to sabotage our national COVID response? Well, yeah, but that may be the wrong question. The reality is a nuanced one. At best, Republicans are demonstrably seeking to undermine confidence in vaccines and masks in ways that lack any serious or discernible public interest rationale and go far beyond mere standard-issue GOP suspicion of government mandates for plainly instrumental purposes. This deserves scrutiny on its own, and I'll tell you a little bit more after this. Hang on just a second.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I'll give you the conclusion. This deserves scrutiny on its own as a form of deceptive bad faith conduct in public service that is itself a big contributor to our crises. It shouldn't be merely accepted as a background condition of our politics that's natural and inevitable, one whose consequences it is upon only Democrats to overcome. Wow. Stay tuned. Justice is next.